Hello, I'm Dietrich Stout, the Associate Director of the Center for Mind, Brain, and Culture, and welcome to Inside the Lab. Or perhaps today I should probably say inside the studio, because our guest is Dr. Stephanie Koziej, who is here to talk to us about her work on what she calls tender activism, and especially her upcoming installation at the Emory Visual Arts Gallery entitled Tender Rhythms. Originally, Dr. Koziej is from Belgium. She has her PhD just recently from Emory's Department of Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. She's published articles and book chapters on topics ranging from the sonification of brainwaves to the works of Freud and the music videos of Björk. Her mixed media art projects include music, theater, performance art, and brain-computer interface. So her installation, Tender Rhythms, is opening July 28th at the Visual Arts Gallery and uses electroencephalography, or EEG, to allow visitors to experience interbrain synchrony with a partner through audiovisual feedback. So welcome, Stephanie. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, this is really cool. I'm looking forward to hearing more about your upcoming installation, and maybe about what was the inspiration for this. What does it mean to you? What visitors could expect to experience?
Yes. Well, so Tender Rhythms is actually the last chapter, or I call it the line of flight of my dissertation. Tender Rhythms: Rethinking Sexuality, Subjectivity, and Sociality through the Hysteric's Desire for Tenderness. It's a mouthful, but so it's an artistic part in which I kind of artistically explore everything that I explore theoretically. And in a nutshell, I critique in my dissertation the Western obsession with autonomy, self-sufficiency, and this reluctance to think of merger. So when we really connect with someone, I explore this through intimacy and sexuality, but I'm also interested in it more generally. Like when we really connect with someone, it's like we are somehow merging. So this distinction between the self and the other seems to be just paused for just a second, and something else is co-created between us, a third entity that is not me, that is not you, it's not the self, it's not the other, it's not masculine, it's not feminine. It's like it's something that is hard to grasp in our Western language that's really built on categories and binaries. So in this installation, I am exploring what happens when we deeply connect with someone. And through my research, I found out that it's hard to put words to that experience. Therefore, in my installation, I am giving this experience finally a voice. So when two people are connecting, music starts to play. So the connection literally gets a voice and can finally speak. So what happens practically is that two people are invited to sit down in front of each other. They're wearing Muse EEG headbands that measure their brain waves. And together with Mike Winters, Dr. Mike Winters, and Daniel Sabio, or the Glad Scientist, we created a music instrument and a brain-computer interface installation that translates that connection between two people into not just music, but also visuals. So when there's no connection, there's no music. Once there is a connection, music starts to play. And the visuals also change. So when there's no connection, two floating cloud-like entities are just projected behind the participants. But from the moment they connect, a third gray cloud-like entity is co-created between them. So artistically representing this third entity that we co-create when we are really connecting with someone. So in a nutshell, that's the installation. And yeah, everyone is welcome to just participate, just RSVP, so you have a spot, and then you can make music and art with your brain. Yeah.
That's so cool. So you've tried this yourself and taken sort of trial versions to conferences and so forth. What's it like when you have that experience and then the music starts playing? do you just get more in sync, or do you like, whoa, and then you lose it, or what is the experience like?
That's a good question. The experiences are varied. I'm always so astonished when it works, because technically, always something can go wrong. The connection can be like problematic or something. And then when it works, it's like, wow. And I even had it with total strangers. I mean, people I just met at a conference, and it's just so magical. And it just means so much to me, because I've been working on this for like 10 years, and to just see and hear the connection speak or like give it a platform. It's somewhat of a transcendental experience, to be honest. Yeah. And it's a big relief when it works too. So both. But I was especially moved when I had my parents do it back at home. I thought it was really beautiful. And when I did it with my dad, we were constantly in sync. It didn't want to stop. So I thought it was very, very cute and meaningful.
Wow, that's really cool. Actually, I mean, that's it sounds like an intense experience. I wonder if it's similar to experiences people may have had where you entrain, for instance, if you're drumming or dancing or doing other things together with people. Does it feel like that?
Yes. So I'm also a musician, and my work on connection and intimacy is incredibly influenced by my music background, and this is also how I somehow like measure connection. It's when I feel as if I am making music with someone. And it's the same with dancing. You can dance with someone and you can feel off, and you can dance with someone and it's like, yes, you're both in the same groove. And this is very interesting, that those concepts, those musical concepts, groove, tune, attunement, they're also used by the psychoanalysts and the scientists that are writing about deep connection between people. And this is also why I use the word tenderness, because tenderness, the root ten, it has that root in common with the word tone and attune. It goes back to like the Proto-Indo-European word tenton, which means to stretch. So yes, the music and like going into the same groove with someone, that is definitely a good indicator and metaphor, or maybe it is more than a metaphor. Maybe that is what's happening when we are really connecting with someone. We are somehow creating some type of music together, although we don't call it that, but some type of emotional, I don't know, music.
Yeah, well, I guess it's an embodied experience that you have, and it seems like an embodied metaphor almost. If that experience is something you've had with music, then that's what you reach for, or dance, or something else where you feel that flow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's quite an experience to have at an art installation. So I hope people will come out and are able to try that out. I'm glad you mentioned you were talking about the word tender there, and I know that has a deep meaning for you, and more broadly. And as I mentioned at the outset, you described your whole sort of approach and body of work as tender activism. Could you maybe unpack that a little bit more as to what that means to you?
Yes, so the word tenderness, I read it for the first time when I was a bachelor student in philosophy back in Belgium, and I was reading Freud. So back in Belgium, we study Freud as a philosopher. So he was one of the many philosophers I read. And so I was young, I was coming of age. I had many existential questions, and I was also becoming intimate, and I had questions about desire and intimacy and love. And there I was reading Freud, and he just gave so many answers to those questions. But at the same time, I was frustrated, because there were parts of his work, especially on hysteria, that I completely did not agree with. And actually, it felt like he was like part of a problem that I experienced. So he writes about how you can have too much affection or tenderness in your childhood, and then you become a frigid lover who cannot give their partner what they are supposed to get. So what he is talking about is you want to linger in touching and kissing, and you don't want to move to genital orgasmic sexuality. Anyway, so it's very, concrete. And so somehow Freud says that if you really like if you like to lose yourself in this intimacy with someone, then you are pathological, you're hysteric, and you're infantile and maternal. So there is this very complex, problematic thing in his writing that I wanted to unpack. And so he uses the word tenderness for that. He says someone who needs too much tenderness. So fast forward, I felt like I needed feminist and critical theory methods to unpack this, because that seemed like a big issue. Also because personally, I was experiencing that if I wanted to have more connecting through kissing and caressing, that the lovers I was with, they got very upset. They even used words like frigid and all that. So I saw this is not an old-fashioned problem. This is actually something that is still happening. So how can I unpack this very, what I now know, phallic, goal-oriented economy of sexual desire? How can I critique this and unpack it? So fast forward, I was at Hopkins for a year to study feminist theory, and there I met so many incredible professors that helped me write my application letters. And then I got into Emory in a women, gender, sexuality studies department. And I was able to really focus on that issue. So my dissertation became like a kind of emancipation of the figure of the hysteric, but also the concept of tenderness, and rethinking the economy of desire as a tender economy of desire, where it's okay to just linger and say that there is a type of pleasure that is created also in tender activities that are not necessarily goal-oriented and orgasm-oriented. So that was the start. And then I realized my big question became, what is so threatening about moments of erotic tenderness that these forefathers of sexuality theory, but also psychology, but also many other philosophers that I read, why do they have to pathologize this? What's happening here? And then I started shifting my focus more to subjectivity and the construct of Western subjectivity in general. It seems that when you really connect in a tender way with someone, then whatever happens seems to be threatening to our Western understanding of adulthood. Self-sufficient, autonomous, invulnerable adulthood. You're not supposed to merge with another. You're supposed to be somehow like a divorced entity, disconnected from other subjects. But when you really merge and connect with someone, it seems that it has to be othered. It has to be infantile or maternal or feminine. So there was this, this connection between deep connecting and othering it. So yeah, my whole dissertation was about unpacking that, emancipating tenderness, saying it's not just between mothers and infants, it's not just between musicians, it's not just between artists, it's also between adults. But maybe we have to rethink adulthood, and so that's why I call myself like a tender activist. I want to like emphasize that tenderness is not something threatening. It is not something that needs to be othered. It's not something that we need to see as infantile or maternal. It is something that adults, hopefully, between each other also have. And actually, it adds value and all that beautiful stuff to life. And yeah, so one of the ways that I do this is through my research, but another way is through art. And I love art, especially because I feel like it helps get this research out of the ivory tower and more to a bigger audience, and to make it playful and to help people start asking questions about, yeah, what is that thing that we co-create when we really, really attune to someone? And maybe I shouldn't think about individuality as so rigid and divorced, but maybe it is okay to sometimes merge with another. And so I guess that's a long answer to the
No,
question.
that's great. There's a lot to follow up on there. And I do want to get back to, you were just starting to talk about the interface between art and science, and that's something I'd like to talk about. But before we move on to that, I just wanted to pick up a thread in your answer. Actually, a couple times now, you've been talking about individualism and sort of a Western ideology. And I think a lot of people will be familiar with that concept. And it's big in social psychology and cross-cultural psychology and what they call cultural neuroscience now, and is often contrasted with collectivism. In Eastern Asia, you know, so these are sort of the two things people have talked about. And I was just wondering, like, when you think about individualism as being a Western thing, are there other cultural models that we could reach to as alternatives, or at least illustrations? And also, you know, historically, is this you know, a very old sort of a Western culture? Is this somewhere more recent? I'm thinking because I was just at a dissertation defense from one of our certificate students about capitalism. And, you know, you were talking about this idea of interpersonal interactions being transactional, and we talked a bit about that. So I guess I'm asking you about, you know, if this is sort of a Western thing, can you unpack, is it a recent thing? Is it associated, you know, is it all parts of our society? And are there other cultural examples that you would point out?
Yeah, so other cultural examples, so the literature I've been reading mostly is Deleuze and Guattari or Foucault, or some feminists from the 70s, 80s, like Irigaray and Kristeva, but also more recently Benjamin. They are really kind of looking at how, the concept of subjectivity in the West, and this goes back to like ancient Greek philosophers, how it's really built upon more an individual, and there seems to be some type of fear and an othering and an feminizing of whenever that seems to be threatened. So it does go back far. So my literature comes mostly from writers in the West itself that are critiquing this intellectual history of individuality. But recently, and especially through a lot of seminars that I took at Emory, I've also been starting to read critical race theorists and post-colonial theorists who are coming from another tradition that are also critiquing this Western subject. So although they're writing from a Western tradition, but as a critical theorist and critically critiquing the West. But most of them are American writers too. So they're still, you know, in the Western canon, although of course we know that they're often not read as Western, which is very problematic. So, but I'm very interested in decolonializing and using decolonial and critical race and feminist, but also disability theorists that are really within the Western framework, critiquing the Western framework. But I have not looked at authors from other continents or other like intellectual traditions. Not yet. That would be really wonderful, but not yet. So my critique is mostly coming from those within the system that are critiquing the system, kind of. And yeah, that was.
Yeah, but that makes sense to me. And yeah, of course, I'm sitting here in the anthropology department, so of course I tend to think, even though my own work is really archaeological in nature, but it does seem like there is a lot of potential there. And particularly, I mean, I'm way out of my depth here as well, but a lot of the things you're saying would relate some of these attitudes towards tenderness, or the way it's treated, and as you say, feminize and infantilize it. Is a lot related to power relations between genders, between people and economics and all these sorts of things. And I just wonder how that could vary in a different context.
Yes. And talking about economy, that's actually the word I use. So Freud has an economy of desire that's phallic and goal-oriented. And one of my hopes in my dissertation was to to offer a different economy of desire. So I kind of wanted to subvert also the concept of economy. And this I take from Irigaray. She's a Belgian French feminist who was very inspired by psychoanalysis, but she was pushed out of the school of psychoanalysis because she was critiquing it, of course. Yeah. So, but yeah, and I also, to go back to your point, you said the individual and then the model of community. Is that the word?
Yeah, they call it collectivist society, the term that gets used. Yeah,
and this is, I've not studied this yet, but this is a question that's been burning in my head for a super long time. Like, this is something that's on my radar. When I read a lot of texts in the Western tradition, I see it's either about individuals or it is about the group. There's a lot written about the group, but I was mostly interested in the diet. Mm-hmm. Because I think it is a separate phenomena. Also, if you just think like experientially in your own life, being in a group is a very different than being on your own, but it's also really different from being in a super intense relationship with someone else. There seems like different features and mechanisms are at stake there. And I was feeling like that was somewhat of a blind spot in the literature that I was reading. That's also why I wanted to hone in on the diet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was saying it's a very interesting time to be doing that, because as you well know, there's a really just this burgeoning field of, interpersonal neuroscience and hyperscanning and techniques like what you're using for your installation, to look at how people align and synchronize interactively with each other. And it's something I'm very excited about. We're going to be having some speakers in the fall on that topic as well. So we're looking forward to that. But so you're positioned at this interface between that scientific activity and artistic expression. And so could you talk a little bit about how those things can benefit each other? Yeah.
And there's a third element. There is the humanities. So there is exact sciences with the neuroscience, somewhat psychology, and then it merges into psychoanalysis, which is some in between. And then there's like super hardcore humanities, the philosophy, the women's studies. And then there is the art. So it's like I'm juggling these. So for me, art, I can give a super long answer, and maybe I shouldn't do that. But I've always been an artist. I just was afraid to call myself an artist. But for me, artistic expression has really been very natural. Singing, dancing, theater, and all that. But then I felt in Belgium, when I was 18, you pick your major and you stick to it. It's very different than in the United States. So, and I was like, I had so many questions. I was interested in so many things. And I was like, okay, let's do philosophy, because I can ask all these questions. Then I felt a little pigeonholed. And then I came to the United States at Hopkins for the first time. I saw, wow, there's this interdisciplinary expression that's possible. People from the humanities are working with scientists and with artists. And I started to allow myself to bring these things back together. And then fast forward, I was at a meeting with scientists here in Atlanta, and I met Mike, who is, his background is in neuroscience and music, and he was doing his PhD in music technology. And we had so much in common. And at that time, I was reading about neuroscientific research about brain synchronicity. And I was like, oh, this is really similar to what I'm doing, but I don't know how to like bring this in. And then him and I, we became friends and we started talking, and he was working on sonification. And little by little, we were like, okay, this should be part of your dissertation, Stephanie. So we were able to together, interdisciplinary, also interpersonal, to create this installation between scientists and artists from different fields and different schools, even, to just put our interests together and create this instrument. And then Daniel Sabio, the Glad Scientist, I knew him also from an art show I went to, and then he came in to do the visuals. So that's the practical answer, how I allowed myself to bring them together. But also, I've been very interested in public scholarship. I don't like to keep my ideas or or like my vision to like the ivory tower. I don't want to just write for other academics and leave it there. I really want to reach a larger audience. And one of the things that you can use as a vehicle to do that is an art installation where you invite a larger audience to participate. I'm also very interested in that translation exercise of taking the research and translating it something more tangible. So that was also one of the like reasons why I moved towards art. So not just is art a very natural expression for me, also I wanted to reach more people. And then finally, like I said, this experience of interconnection, through my research, I found that it has been excluded from the literature that I was reading. If it was there, it was othered, it was pathologized, it was, you know, it was a taboo. So if this language that is used to create science and to make science, if that excluded this experience, then why stay in this form of that science, the written art, the written word, the academic article? Then why not completely gear shift and do something very different? So that's also one of the reasons why I wanted to, like, in the form of my dissertation, really take a line of flight, as Deleuze and Guattari call it, and reach for a very different medium in a way to subvert also the form of this legacy that had excluded this experience in the first place. So that's the critical element to why I gear shifted to art, and especially music.
Yeah, that's again, there's a lot of stuff in there to kind of unpack and follow up. I like what you were saying about the process of doing interdisciplinary work. It's it's a little bit different what I've done, but it's very stimulating because it really is like a negotiation. Where you have to find a way to meet people. You come to a deeper understanding of where you're coming from as well through that. But I find it very interesting that you're talking about this sort of interpersonal connection as being a taboo topic in what you were reading, and maybe sort of baked into the scientific method of presenting results. Because it seems like in terms of content, I don't know if 25 years ago, there was a big buzz about mirror neurons and all this kind of stuff when I was in graduate school. And I think a lot of people would say that this ability to sync up with each other is perhaps the most fundamental aspect of being human, and what is, gotten us to where we are today. So it's just interesting to hear that you find that as, sort of being a taboo topic in these reads. It's a strange contradiction.
Yeah, I think that maybe to become the Westerners that we are now, I think maybe we had to unlearn syncing a little bit. I think it is not always in our advantage. You have people they're called oversensitive, kind of like very parallel to what Freud called too much affection. Like there's something like too empathetic. Like it's almost like it becomes, and this becomes then political. It becomes like it is very hard to survive in our world if you are too attuned to others. And I am very interested in that, and I mourn about that, and I'm very touched by that, and I want to kind of fight against that. So that's also kind of connected to the tender activism. I wish there was more connection. But if you think about racism, misogyny, bullying, like all that hate and violence, at the core of it, there is a lack of connection. If you really connect and empathize with another, you would not do that. So it's almost like we unlearned this, or I don't know if we unlearned it. I don't know if that's the right thing to say, but I feel like that's what's lacking, right? This ability to really empathize and connect and synchronize, because otherwise we wouldn't exclude. So there is something fundamentally violent, I think, about this obsession with the individual, because what it means to be an individual or to have a particular identity is to other yourself from others, which sometimes can be fine, but when it becomes violent and exclusive and racial and misogynist and all that, then it becomes really a problem, and it's so baked in our system and our society. So yeah, that's like a chaotic answer to why I think I'm so fascinated by this. But also I feel like sometimes when I read neuroscientific research on synchronicity, that's what I'm missing. I'm missing this critical element, because it's like, oh yeah, sometimes we synchronize and it's wonderful, but I'm also interested in why so often we are not synchronizing, and that can lead to so much violence and exclusion, and why is that okay? I mean, it's not okay, but why are we, why is this happening so much? And that critical aspect, I don't see it enough in more scientific research, and I would love to add that. That's why I emphasized that my tender work is also an activism work. I see it as more part of a larger political issue and work and motivation.
Yeah, thanks. And as you're talking there, the word that kept popping in my mind is alienation. There's this profound alienation of people from each other.
Yes.
And of course, that's a word that gets used a lot also in talking about economics and socialism and capitalism and these sorts of things. It does seem that there's this deep connection with colonialism, with economic systems and social systems, and then this very reaching into this very personal, interpersonal sphere as well. That seems a very rich area and I think, the neuroscientists are just starting to, look into what are the circumstances that are more or less favorable to alignment, and what kinds of individuals and what kinds of experiences make this. So it seems all very an exciting and important direction to be going. So I did want to ask you, like, that's basically, where do you see this as going? Like, what would you like to do next? What do you think is important for the field to do?
Yeah, I have so many ideas. I would love to kind of like keep working on tender rhythms on the installation, but maybe, if I had more funding, like blow it up a little bit, and I don't know, have like a little bit of a different version of it, where it's maybe more like an immersive experience, where it's not just two people sitting with the EEG headset, but it's maybe like a more 3D experience, or a more immersive experience where, I don't know, this third entity can even become more almost tangible. That's an idea. But I'm also very interested in the critical and the feminist and even, I think, post-colonial potential of BCI art to use this insight of neuroscience to sonify and visualize these connections between individuals, and then what's next, like what can we do once we know that there's really something that we co-create, and then think of the political potential and repercussions of that, but then also use that to then critique all the systems that are based upon, like you said, alienation. I just really hope, I would love to bring this installation to like parts of the world where there's so much alienation, and just a tiny bit, like scratch that problem, and just like hopefully open some eyes, and hopefully make people a little more humane and less violent. Well, that's an answer.
No, I mean, that sounds exactly. I was thinking also, as you were talking about, just different groups of people, different places in the world, different contexts, of course, a gallery is a particular social context. You've done it also at academic conferences. That's another, and it would just be really fascinating and I think valuable to bring this to as many different places and contexts and people, and just
Yes.
see how their experience differs as well as what it can bring to them. Yeah.
Yes, because it's true. A gallery is a very different space. But this at Emory will be the first time it's really at a gallery. So I'm really, really excited. Before that, it was mostly at like science fairs or like scientific conferences. And now it will be a standalone in a gallery. Yeah, I'm very excited to see how it goes. I hope some people show up, and it would be really wonderful to like hear their reaction and see what they take from it, and kind of let the art piece, let it go. It's the same with singing, or songwriting. When you create a song, you have to let it go and see how it doesn't impact people, and it starts having its own life. So I think the same is for this installation. Like, we created it and now I have to let it go.
Well, hopefully we can accompany this video with a link to the installation. But do you have some basic detail for people who are watching who would like to go experience this?
Yes, so it's happening July 29th through August 1st. So this summer at Emory's Visual Arts Gallery. And it's encouraged to RSVP. You can show up and that's totally fine, but encourage to RSVP just because this is an installation that only 2 people at the same time can participate. So in order to not have too long lines and allow me time to like charge the headset again, I created some time slots, and it's very easy. You just click on the link and pick a slot, and you're welcome. And yeah, and there's nothing invasive. I know it sounds like ooh EEG, but it's just like a headset like this, no gels, like it's not gonna mess up your hair or your face, just like an easy headset that will go on your head, and then you sit in front of another person, another visitor, or me. It will depend on who's available, and then we'll see if there's a connection and if we create music or not. And if not, that's also okay.
Cool. Well, you can't wait to check it out, and hope people will be able to join. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and we really appreciate it. And see you there.
Okay. Excited for everyone to explore tender rhythms with me. Bye. Thank you so much for the interview.
Well, thank you.